The Los Angeles Chargers are back again this week for another AFC West matchup, this time taking on the Las Vegas Raiders back stateside. New teams, new division, and an 11-year gap, but Jim Harbaugh and Pete Carroll are officially division rivals again. Their head-to-head record is currently tied at 4 wins apiece, so this game is for all the marbles, at least until they play again in November. Will Harbaugh and the Chargers rush out to a win, or will Pete Carroll and the Raiders steal a much-needed divisional win? We'll find out in the simulation, but first, we have to make our drink, the Dark Clouds. Chargers fans, welcome back. Raiders fans, good to have you. Pretty funny that we got 3 of the AFC West teams in prime time in the first 2 weeks, and then Denver just kind of has to sit and wait around until week 4 to get their prime time matchup. Los Angeles and Las Vegas, both, entertainment hubs, both big tourist spots. So unsurprisingly, they've got a lot of drinks tied to them, even if most of those drinks aren't created by people, from LA or even created in the city itself. But that's honestly kind of fitting considering how much, immigrants and tourists really form the bedrock of these cities. So staying on theme, our representative for the Chargers this week was created by an Englishman for a conference in New Orleans. It is a Smokestack Lightning. As I alluded to, the Smokestack Lightning was created by English drinks writer and publisher Simon Difford in 2009 for that year's Tales of the Cocktail Festival. If you spent any amount of time online researching cocktails or just, interested in making them, you've almost certainly come across Difford's guide, which, in my opinion, is one of the best websites out there for, finding information on cocktails. The drink itself is sort of a riff on a margarita, starting with a tequila base, agave syrup, and lime juice, but then adding a bit of peated whiskey to it to really get those sort of fireplace flavors in there. So yes, while the drink doesn't have any direct connection to Los Angeles or the Chargers, the fact that there's lightning in the name and tequila in the spec, in my opinion, is more than enough to have this drink be their representative. All right, so one thing that really interested me about this drink was the decision to use tequila with a little bit of peated whiskey instead of just using mezcal. So mezcal is a lot like tequila, except it has a lot more of those sort of smoky flavor notes to it. So the moment I read this spec, my first thought was just like, why go through the trouble of introducing a whole new spirit, which the recipe only calls for a 1/4 ounce of this peated whiskey. So I'm using an Ardbeg. He used I'm not even going to try to pronounce that one. I do not have good enough pronunciation to take a shot at it.
Torveg.
But this is a very peaty whiskey. So I was so curious, in fact, that I decided to just make a version, one according to the original Simon Difford spec, and then another version using just a straight 2 ounces of mezcal. And we're gonna do a little taste test and see what the difference is between them. So this is the original spec, which is 1 3/4 ounces of tequila, a 1/4 ounce of our peated whiskey, 1/2 ounce of agave syrup, and 3/4 ounces of lime juice. Ooh, okay, wow. I mean, with it only being a 1/4 ounce of this whiskey, I was a little uncertain on how much it would really come through in the drink, but it absolutely does. It's very well balanced. This is actually, that peat smoke is such a strong flavor that, yeah, I think if you did any more than a 1/4 ounce, it would actually just totally drown out everything else in this drink. Perhaps the most notable thing, though, is you really get it on the nose. Like, you can smell that peaty, smoky scent on the nose of this drink. And so that sort of primes you mentally to expect that sort of campfire, fireplace type, smoke flavor later on when you actually go and try it. Yeah, I mean, it's delightfully well balanced. It's basically, a smoked up margarita. But that makes me curious. What about our mezcal version? So I expect the nose to be different. And it is. It's a different kind of smoke. And this is sort of what I thought it was going to be. That mezcal smokiness, it's...
That smell. and a smelly smell. A smelly smell that smells smelly.
The peat from the whiskey, that smoke is very much like a campfire, bonfire type smoke, you know? It's the smoke of like wood and dirt and all of that sort of like earthiness. Whereas the mezcal smoke, I mean, I guess technically it's you know, the agave, which is what's creating that scent. But for me, like, I can't place it. Like, it still reads as smoky, but in a totally alien way to anything that you would sort of experience in your daily life, I think. Okay. It's a lot smoother as well when you just use the mezcal. I think using that split base of tequila and peated whiskey, what you get is you get a little bit of tension. You get a little bit of interplay between the different flavors, where your mouth can sort of pick out that there are two things that have been blended together here, and as a result, they sort of come in and out of focus. Whereas with just the straight mezcal base, it just sort of flows as this one note throughout the entire time, and it doesn't really hit that same sort of level of evolution that the original spec does. Yeah, and then the smoke is still there. It definitely, like, you know, you can tell this apart from a regular margarita. You can certainly tell it apart from all the rum-maritas that we did for the Texans episode. But it's not a bad drink. Like, it's a very good smoky margarita. But I do understand a little bit now why the peated whiskey was chosen for the original version of this drink. And I think it is because, you know, it really does add another layer to it. It adds another channel, basically, if you're sort of thinking of it from like an audio perspective. Adding that additional layer, splitting up the base, just creates so much more contrast and so much more evolution throughout the drink. Wow, okay, this was really informative. I figured there would be a difference between the drinks, but I didn't realize it would be sort of this pronounced. Again, neither of these are bad drinks. They're both really solid, but yeah, I think, you know, for a cocktail festival full of, you know, bartenders, mixologists, people who do this shit for a living, I do think if you pulled up, you know, with just the mezcal margarita, people would be like, okay, this is what you got. Whereas if you pull up with, you know, the peated smokestack lightning, you know, OG recipe, this is a drink that people can sort of sit and talk about and really start, you know, picking each other's brains about. Now, the Raiders cocktail is actually a local cocktail, just not a local of Las Vegas. Indeed, the Autumn Wind was created back when the Raiders called Oakland home, though the exact date of creation is unclear. This tiki-style drink was created by bartender Martin Delgado at the Prizefighter Bar in Emeryville, California, and everything about this drink just screams Raiders, from the name to the ingredient list and even the colors and presentation. For those unfamiliar, the Autumn Wind is a poem set to music, often referred to as the Battle Hymn of Raider Nation. It was created in 1974 by modifying a 1941 poem called Pirate Song and then setting it to a musical score created by Sam Spence.
The autumn wind is a pirate, blustering in from sea.
Now, the Autumn Wind cocktail starts with a base of tequila, velvet falernum, and lime juice, and then tops that off with a float of black rum, matching the team's colors with its black and silvery layers. As we covered last episode, the inclusion of rum is just a no-brainer for any team that has, you know, a pirate sort of theme, but the inclusion of tequila in the base is actually a really nice little nod to all of the West Coast cities that this team is called home. Now that we've gotten acquainted with both our teams, let's make like a weather wizard, pulling them together, combining our smokestack lightning with our autumn wind to create the dark clouds. All right, so no doubt the base spirit for this drink has to be the tequila. You know, both of our inspirations use it. It's a super popular spirit in the region. Got to make this the center point in the drink. One other thing that I wanted to keep in, I wanted to keep in the Velvet Falernum from our Autumn Wind. This is a tiki staple that I've been meaning to try for the longest time and just haven't really found a good excuse to, so this is the perfect opportunity. It's kind of like an alcoholic version of Orgeat in some way. It's sort of that like almondy, citrusy, sort of flavor profile with this really sort of silky, creamy, hence the velvet mouthfeel to it. So super interesting ingredient. Definitely want to make it a key part of this drink. And then also I wanted to keep that float of black rum that the Autumn Wind does because I think it creates a really cool visual effect. Flavor-wise, we'll have to see how that sort of affects things, just having a float of dark rum on top of the drink. But I think aesthetically, like, it really kind of goes unmatched. So, final spec for this drink is going to be 1/2 ounce of tequila in our shaker. Get our ice in there. I think this would be really good with a reposado tequila, but sadly, I only have a Blanco. So we're gonna do 1.5 ounces of that. Follow that up with 1/2 ounce of our Velvet Falernum right here. Oh, it's got such a cool and unique scent to it. Like, it's one of those things, kind of like when you smell peated whiskey, actually, for the first time. And you're just like, well, no, it's even more interesting than peated whiskey, because peated whiskey, you smell that for the first time. You're like, that smells like a campfire. First time I smelled this, I was like, that smells like nothing I've ever encountered in my life before. 1/2 ounce of agave syrup. There are some syrups where I don't know if it is like looked down on if you just buy them from the store, like you gotta make your own. I feel like agave is one of the ones that basically everybody just kind of buys from the store. I don't know how many people actually make their own agave syrup. And then finally, 3/4 ounce of our lime juice. I think I need to go get some more limes after this. Woo, yeah, we're running low. All right, take all of that. Got our ice in there, shake it up. All right, those are all chilled and well acquainted now. We are going to take our coupe glass, strain that in there. Look at that. Now we're gonna try to float some dark rum over top of it. I realized while I was making this that we might not actually be able to really float this. If it is, I'm also gonna pre-measure how much I'm gonna float because I don't wanna accidentally pour 1/2 of this into there. So we're gonna do about 1/2 ounce. We're gonna try to float 1/2 ounce of this black rum over top, but the densities might not work out, so let's see. Let's try real carefully, see. Are you gonna float? You're kind of floating. There we go. That kind of floats. Floats a little bit. Look at that. You got sort of 2 layers there. You got the layers of the black rum on top, rest of the drink below. Sort of like dark clouds above the surface of the water. So let's give this a try. Ooh, okay. I mean, definitely, because I floated that black rum on top, you definitely do just sort of get a lot of that in the first sip. It's a lot of that sort of, molassesy, really quite sweet rum flavors. But let's see, there's a little bit of the creaminess of the Velvet Falernum coming through. So I know I'm getting more of the other parts of the drink in there, and it's not just straight black rum, but I'm gonna try another sip and see if I can get a bit more of the rest of this drink. Ooh. Wow, I was worried with the Velvet Falernum that 1/2 ounce of it wasn't going to be enough, and it was kind of just gonna get drowned out by, the lime and the agave and the black rum and the tequila. But the Velvet Falernum actually does a really good job of standing up to itself and making its presence heard. That sort of like spicy nuttiness really sort of comes through in the drink. And it's surprisingly well balanced. It might be a little sweet, honestly. Wow, that's a really good drink. Wow. Damn. I think honestly, like in many ways, what this whole section has really gone to show is how flexible that margarita drink template is, right? You can, add ingredients to it, sort of play around with what your different bases are, different modifiers. There's so much you can do. And as long as you sort of keep that core margarita spec of, base spirit, sweetener, lime juice, as long as you keep those sort of within their appropriate ratios, you can really do a lot sort of just like free flow off the cuff and not have to worry about messing the drink up too bad. Wow, so with this lovely drink in hand, let's get into the simulations. Now, the Raiders got the ball first this game, but it only took them 2 plays to give the ball right back to the Chargers as Dante Jackson picked off this pass from Geno Smith to Trey Tucker. Now, despite being gifted the ball in excellent field position, the Chargers' drive was blunted by a pathfinding failure as Herbert scrambles directly into a double-teamed D lineman on 3rd and 3, forcing them to settle for a field goal. The ensuing possession for the Raiders went far smoother, ultimately capped off with Ashton Jeanty torching the Chargers' defense for a 16-yard rushing touchdown. 1 Chargers 3 and out later, the Raiders move the ball all the way down to the 19-yard line, where they turn it over for a second time on this Geno Smith strip sack. The Chargers took that ball and proceeded to march all the way down the field with it, before Justin Herbert takes off from the pocket, scrambling in untouched for a 10-yard rushing touchdown. Brock Bowers was determined to show everyone that year 1 wasn't a fluke in this game, as Geno Smith just barely gets this ball off in time, finding a wide-open Bowers for a 34-yard gain. A few plays later in that drive, Raiders are at the 2-yard line, empty backfield. Geno takes this right up the middle to put the Raiders back in the lead, 14-10. Given just over a minute left in the half, the Chargers managed to make it within field goal range. Jim Harbaugh jump scare! Dicker the kicker is good from 45 to make it 13-14 at the half. Good drive from the Raiders, but rookie Jack Betch drops this 3rd down pass, leading the Raiders to kick the field goal to extend the lead to 4. With time expiring in the 3rd quarter, welcome back to LA, Keenan Allen, 21-yard receiving touchdown. Chargers retake the lead 20-17. Raiders punt on their ensuing possession, after which the Chargers run the clock all the way down to the 2-minute warning. From the 3-yard line, Najee Harris up the gut, Chargers up 10 with less than 2 minutes left. It takes the Raiders all of their timeouts and nearly all the remaining time, but they make it to the 2-yard line, where Geno finds Brock Bowers to barely keep their hopes alive. Needing it to stand a chance, Raiders go for the onside kick, which the Chargers recover and then proceed to kneel out the remaining 4 seconds, securing their 27-24 win. Overall, another game where the end score makes it seem far closer than the game actually was. I wouldn't say that Bowers' TD was a garbage time score, but it was pretty close. Both of these quarterbacks had above average games, though nothing too crazy. Geno had more passing yards, but he did also have that interception in the strip sack, so a bit of a mixed bag there. Herbert did exactly what Harbaugh wants him to do. Complete passes, keep the ball safe, keep the pass game a threat so that the defense can't sell out against the run. No heroics required here. Over at the rushing stats, Najee Harris had basically a perfectly average game. Last season, he averaged 61.4 yards on 15 carries per game. No crazy quarterback rushing numbers here either. 54 yards on 7 carries is well within expectations for Geno. 2 for 10 is maybe a little low for Herbert, but still quite reasonable. Honestly, the only thing that really stands out is how little love the rookie running backs got. I don't think there's any universe where Ashton Jeanty and Omarion Hampton are only getting a combined 7 carries in this game. Both of these coaches love to run the ball, and these teams have invested too much in these rookies to underutilize them this massively. With the receiving stats, we see one of my favorite phenomena, the Will Dissly pop-off game. So much love for Will Dissly, but he's not one of these crazy receiving tight ends, right? He's not a Sam Laporta or a Brock Bowers or a Travis Kelce. In fact, he hasn't had a single season with more than 500 rushing yards. However, he will absolutely just randomly put up massive numbers against teams, like when he had 8 catches for 81 yards against Arizona last year, when he had 4 catches for 80 yards and a touchdown against the Bengals. So glad to see that that is captured in this simulation. The top section of the receiving stats honestly looks really solid, and it's not until we get down into the lower portion that we see Madden once more slandering Lad McConkey. 1 catch for 8 yards? Absolutely crazy. His worst game last year went for over 3 times that. SMH my head, dude. The Monte Carlo sim. Alright, that's better. 53 yards on 5 catches for the lad. The simulation is also incredibly bullish on the rookies, putting them both at around 100 yards rushing, which does understandably cut into the passing numbers for both of these teams. Based on his target percentage last year, though, I'm not surprised to see Brock Bowers as the leading receiver over on the Raiders side of the stat sheet. Finally, the Monte Carlo score distributions. Nothing particularly interesting here. These are 2 pretty evenly matched teams, and the scores reflect that. The most common outcome is a 14-14 tie as per usual, and averaging out all of the results gives the Chargers a slight edge, predicting a 20-19 Chargers victory. Do you agree with the simulations, or do you envision a different future? I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts down in the comments. As a reminder, our drink for this matchup is the intricately sweet and nutty Dark Clouds. If you decide to make it, please let me know what you think, and I'd love to hear your suggestions for what drink should be your team's representative. Stay curious, stay thirsty, and I'll see you in the next one.